Coast Salish people were the first settlers in the Qualicum area. They named this place Squally, meaning chum salmon. For more than 4,000 years, these people lived in the area, hunting and fishing. In the early 1790s, the Spanish visited these shores at what is now French Creek. Soon the British settlers started coming. One of the first residents was Thomas Kincaid, who arrived by sloop with his family in 1879. They settled at the mouth of the Little Qualicum River. The Kincaids were followed by Harry de Greek, who 9 years later started a farm on the present site of the Qualicum Golf Course. A road from the south reached Parksville in 1886 and was extended to Qualicum Beach in 1894. Major William Gregg became the first official resident of the town site in 1910. The town's first store and post office were built for Ernest Bunting in the town site 1 year later. The Qualicum Beach Hotel and Golf Course were built in 1913 by the Merchants Trust and Trade Company. The golf course was first managed by Thompson Tin. In 1914, the railway reached Qualicum, opening the area to settlers. More stores were built, and the area was opened up to settlers and visitors. By 1942, Qualicum Beach officially attained village status. In 1983, it became a town. The stores and buildings from those early years remain, although some only in memory. Take a walk through the streets of Qualicum and discover the early history. This community hall has been the heart of the community since it was built in 1933. It's the third such facility for the town. A variety of functions take place here every day, including the sport of curling. This year, 1992, a new civic center has been constructed to accommodate the growing population. The Qualicum Barber and Beauty Shop was originally owned and operated by Helen and Phil Eggersman. Phil started clearing his half-acre of land for the shop in 1943 and got a permit to build 2 years later. Just next door was the dry cleaner shop. From 1946 to 1949, it was run by David and Marion Sawyer. A subsequent owner operated a radio store in the building, and today the shop is a residence. The Stump is a conversation piece for the town. It was donated by J.L. Fabric from his farm at the end of Bennett Road. It was hand-cut using a large crescent saw. The stump measured 7 feet in diameter and yielded 40 cubic meters of wood. It represents the size of the trees in this area at the time. This 1925 Baldwin logging locomotive was restored by the Qualicum Beach Railway Buffs. The present owner is the province of British Columbia, but the locomotive is on lease by the town of Qualicum Beach Historical and Museum Society. It arrived at its present location in August 1985. The railway station was built in 1914 after the Esquimalt and Nanaimo Railway, known as the E&N, was extended to Qualicum Beach in 1911. There were 3 sawmills operating in the area, and the railway was a great asset to the lumber industry. The Old Train Station Society is hoping to refurbish the station in the future. Across Railway Street, opposite the railway station, was the ice cream factory. It was owned and operated by Charlie White, the station agent from 1924 through 1938. He didn't sell his ice cream on Sundays, though, because of his religious convictions. The first community hall was built in the early 1920s. Called the Fisher's Hall, this was a 2-story building at the corner of Beach and Harlech Roads. The second community hall was a building used originally as a stable for Parker Bellier's horses. These halls were the gathering places for all major events, especially badminton, Saturday night dances, and whist drives. This brick building was built in 1958 and is the present home of the Dominion Fisheries Department. Until 1968, it was headquarters for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Qualicum Beach. The annex, now demolished, was located at the corner of Sunningdale and Beach. It was a 2-story building housing all the staff who worked at the Qualicum Inn. Later, it was used as the village office. Across from the annex on Beach Avenue is the Powerhouse, built in 1929 by Turley Brothers Contractors for the BC Electric Company. The powerhouse supplied electricity from Craig's Crossing, south of Parksville, to Dashwood, north of Qualicum Beach, from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. Auxiliary power was supplied from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., by the engine from Charlie White's ice cream factory. There were 85 customers in 1930, and that grew to 675 by 1946 when it was taken over by the BC Power Commission. After 1935, the powerhouse was used as backup in the event of a power failure and later became a workshop and storage yard for BC Hydro. The building and site were bought by the town in 1983 as a home for the Qualicum Beach Museum and Historical Society. Restoration was completed in June 1988 and opened to the public on July 9th that same year. The railway employed Chinese workers to build the tracks. One of these men, Wing Ho, managed the Chinese laundry located between Harlech Avenue and First Avenue. The building is gone, with only a treed lot left to mark its place. The original fire hall was constructed on this site in 1947. The building has been expanded several times. The fire department, all volunteers, had been organized prior to construction. In earlier days, volunteers manned an old truck to go firefighting. It wasn't until the 1960s that they received a modern vehicle. This building, originally a Presbyterian church, was built around 1919. 6 years later, it became the First United Church. In 1942, a second building was constructed on Memorial Avenue and Village Way. It was used until 1961, when the present St. Stephen's United Church was erected. The town office, at its present site on the corner of 2nd Avenue and Primrose. The building was erected to replace the old village office, which was located in the Qualicum Inn Annex on Sunningdale. The Thrall House sits on the south side of 2nd Avenue in the middle of the block. The house was built by Bill Thrall in 1936 at a cost of just $500. Qualicum Meat Market was located on the site where the credit union now stands. Originally built and run by Mr. Lee, it was taken over by the McKinder brothers. The business was bought in 1921 by William Hackworth. It continued in operation until it was demolished by fire in 1944. Mr. Hackworth and his nephew, Craig Reed, built a supermarket on the same property with an ice storage building and cold storage lockers attached. The two storage facilities took up the site where Touch of Class now stands. The small local library was desperate for space and rented rooms in the grocery store. Because of its proximity to the cold storage units, the library was dubbed the Deep Freeze. A subsequent move in 1958 took the supermarket to the store now occupied by Ethel's Ladies' Wear on Memorial Avenue. Across the street from the meat market was a tea room owned by Mrs. Cunningham and later by Mrs. Marshall. When the tea room closed, the building was renovated and became a residence. Century 21 Real Estate are the present tenants. The Village Theatre came into being in 1949 for the showing of movies. Built in July, it had state-of-the-art equipment and was considered one of the finest theaters on central Vancouver Island. The first movie shown there was Sorrowful Jones, starring Bob Hope. It closed in 1957 and reopened sporadically over the next few years. In the early 1970s, it was purchased by the Little Theatre Group of Qualicum Beach, known as the Echo Players. The name Echo stands for Arrington, Coombs, Hilliers, and others. Qualicum Beach Bakery was located at the southwest corner of 2nd and Memorial Avenue, the site now occupied by the Cottage Gift Boutique. It was originally built as a bakery around 1913 by Fred Whitney. Mr. and Mrs. Miller bought out the business in 1927 and were there for 6 years. The first government liquor store in Qualicum Beach was also located here. It later became a gift shop. PDQ Stage Garage, owned by Russell Hayes, was located on the southeast corner of Memorial and 2nd Avenue. PDQ were the initials for Parksville District of Qualicum. The garage burned down and was rebuilt around 1930 by Lamming Brothers Freight. It was later taken over by Parker Brothers. Helen Eggersman operated a beauty and barber shop in one of the rooms. The building is the site of the present Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. The elementary school was located on the lot south of the PDQ Stage Garage. The teachers at the school boarded at Gaffney's. Gaffney's, now the Sawmill Restaurant, was located on the northeast corner of Memorial and 2nd Avenue. It was built in 1911 and used as a boarding house upstairs with a pool hall downstairs. The mill hands from the 3 local mills played pool there in the evenings. As time went on, the building became a general store, a shoe store, and later a beauty parlor run by Mrs. Agersman. Other businesses have included dry goods and chinaware, a drugstore, and Kingsley's Menswear. Eventually, it became the Edelweiss Restaurant and then the Sawmill Restaurant. Until 1945, the lot next to Gaffney's stood vacant. Then Chester Good purchased the land and built an office where he carried on business over the next several years. His sign read, H.C. Good Limited, Insurance and Real Estate. The site is presently home for the bookcase. Next to H.C. Good Limited was the first grocery store and post office in Qualicum Beach. This was Ernest Bunting's store, built in 1911. Mr. Cormack was the postmaster. The building was sold, becoming known as Cormack and Gibson, and later, when the building burned down in 1952, it was the Red and White Grocery. Beside the grocery store was the hardware store, run by Garney St. Germain. Various other owners have carried on the business over the years. Wilkinson's shoe store was originally built by Arthur Barthorpe as a cobbler shop and shoe store. It was sold to Victor Wilkinson in 1938. He managed the business until about 1948, when it was sold to Arthur and Mabel Simpson for shoe repairs and shoe sales. A very small building next to the shoe store housed the library and Thwaites real estate office. In 1952, fire destroyed all the buildings on this side of the street up to H.C. Good Limited. Mr. Good's building was saved because he had constructed a firewall between his business and his neighbors. Shortly afterward, Parker Bellier rebuilt Red and White Groceries on this property. In 1958, it changed owners and became Reed's Market. Since 1971, it has been Ethel's Ladies' Wear. The Villager Menswear is a relative newcomer on the main street. It was built in 1975. Originally, there were only 2 businesses on the west side of Memorial Avenue, Ponsford's Garage and Sanders the Butcher. Ponsford's Garage became a hardware store run by Mr. Bartlett and was later sold to Jack Stewart of Nanaimo. Eventually, it was rebuilt as the Village Garage. Sanders the Butcher was the store and home of the Sanders family. It was built in 1922, and the business was carried on until 1943, when Mr. Sanders sold to Harold Jones and Dick Langley. In 1944, it reopened as a meat market. For a while, it was operated by the Camp family as a lunch counter and ice cream parlor. Then it was run by Evan Waddell as a photo shop. Since 1981, it has been occupied by the Camera Art Gallery. In 1945, Mr. Welsh built a series of stores. They stretched from the lane of 2nd Avenue, around the corner, down Memorial Avenue, to the Camera Art Gallery. In these stores, a number of businesses were housed, including Cameron Crichton's Menswear, the library, Tot and Teen Clothing, Fraser's Drug Store, and Thwaites Real Estate. The Bank of Commerce took over the A&M store at the corner of 2nd Avenue and Memorial in 1947. A&M is believed to be the abbreviation for Ancient and Modern. Qualicum Beach continues to grow and to attract thousands of visitors each year. People come here for the same reasons they have in the past: the beaches, golfing, and the hometown atmosphere.